Thank you, everyone. I'm excited to be here. I know several of you were also at the Sustainable Packaging Coalition Conference in Denver for the past couple of days, so we've been doing nothing but talking about packaging and recycling. Caution, we've not solved the problem yet, but I'm definitely excited to be here to talk to all of you. I feel like there's some really good energy in this space, and so to get us started, we looked at specifically multi-laminate packaging, flex film packaging. We'll go into a little bit more about what that is. But as Caitlin said, I'm going to do a little bit of Sustainable Packaging 101, a little explanation on the recycling challenges, and we're going to see what we can walk through together for solutions. So a little bit about EcoCycle. We are a nonprofit. There's only 2 nonprofit recyclers left in the US. So we have a little bit of a unique voice in the industry. And we're basically a jack of all trades when it comes to recycling. So anything you have so far recycled here or anytime you're going to be in Boulder is first going to come to the Boulder County Recycling Center. So all your plastic bottles, cardboard, beer bottles, that sort of thing. We are going to sort it out and we are going to sell it to markets mostly across the US, a little bit in North America. That's the heart of recycling. Whatever we collect, we have to be able to sell, and we have to be able to sell it at a cost that covers our cost to collect and process. So we've been doing that here in the county for over 40 years. We also run an innovative center called the Center for Hard to Recycle Materials. That's where we take electronics, plastic bags, block styrofoam packaging. We take yoga mats, because welcome to Boulder, that's what we do. The charm, as we like to call it, is set up for those products that are not necessarily collected through your curbside bin, think mattresses, but are fully recyclable, right? So there's things that can be recycled through the curbside bin, and then there's other things that need special programs. So those are our collection side of things. We also run a fleet of trucks. So we actually go around and pick up recycling and compost from businesses around the county, so we understand those logistics. And we work with composters, so that helps us understand the compostable packaging situation a little bit. And at our heart and soul, we are educators. We are in every classroom in Boulder County. We are down at the state legislature. We're talking around the country about the value of recycling, why we do it, what works, and the help that we need to make it work better. So with that, we are going to focus a little bit more on what we call multi-laminate packaging. Just so we all know what we're talking about, we're basically talking about the pouches, right? So I know most of you use these type of products. They're used in a variety of industries. And there's really no surprise because honestly, they're a good package, right? They're delivering a lot of value to you in terms of protecting your contents, providing the right moisture barrier, extending shelf life. And they're doing that using relatively little material. So no surprise that these are growing 3 to 5% growth per year. They are a booming packaging industry material. So the Pet Sustainability Coalition looked at what is the estimated use within the industry, and the number is 300 million pounds per year. Plastic pet food and treat bags in the US. So sizable impact that we can have if we can do something good with these products, and I have no doubt that this is probably going to grow over time as well. So what's the problem? Great package, this is where it ends up, right? And that's where you guys have some frustration, your consumers have some frustration, we as recyclers have some frustration. So how do we solve this problem, and what does that look like? So let's talk a little bit more about recycling. Why is it a problem? So as I mentioned, our business is we collect the materials, we have to be able to sell them to someone. And our biggest challenge with the pouches is nobody wants to buy them from us first. And then we have to look at what's the willingness they are to pay for those pouches and does that cover collection costs. But right now there are very limited of any markets for these materials. It's very much in its infancy stage. And part of the problem is that it's multi-material, right? So you have multiple different layers of different types of packaging, and recycling is just not set up really well to deal with that. Basically because we're trying to provide a feedstock, right? So when I sell plastic bottles to a company, they're going to use those plastic bottles to make carpet. They want the plastic. They don't want the labels. They don't want any other additives. They are buying a raw, this is their input, and in order to make a quality output, they need to know what they're putting in. When they buy a load of pouches, it's all over the board. How much polyethylene it is, how much nylon, what kind of zip closure, who's got metallic in there. You can't make a quality product if you don't know what you have going into it. So those type of multi-layer packages are super complex from the recycling side of things. That being said, you've probably read in the news that recycling itself is having some issues, right? It has been, I'm just going to flat out say it, a terrible year to be in recycling. Prices are challenging, to say the least. And there's been a lot of talk about plastics, as I'm sure you guys have heard. The statistics, 9% of plastics have ever been recycled. That doesn't make you feel good as a recycler, right? And these are the tough conversations we're starting to have, where we're literally, I've been around the country and around the world this year to say, we are not going to recycle our way out of this plastics problem, right? It is just, recycling is not the answer to this. That's been hard to say, but at the same time, it's been really encouraging to see so much global conversation happening around recycling, to see groups like yours coming together to say, okay, how can we as different parts of the supply chain really work together to solve this problem? So in terms of plastics recycling, there are some good working models out there. If you recycle your plastic water bottles, your plastic soda bottles, your milk jugs, they are getting recycled. They are going to get recycled. That is all happening here in the US. Those are strong markets. So if you're using those products, there's good recycling for those materials. The rest of the plastics, yeah, it's where it gets a little sticky. Some of your yogurt containers have some good markets. Some plastic bags have some good markets. Clamshells are a little bit of a maybe, kind of depending where you are. And that's it, right? So we have this sort of very small, successful part of recycling plastics, and then we have this whole other world of plastics. So again, recycling is it's definitely not going to be the only solution. And we have groups like Ellen MacArthur Foundation starting to look at, so what does success really look like? And we got some goals looking at probably 50% of plastics are going to be able to be recycled worldwide. That leaves 30% to be redesigned, different types of plastics, different products, and 20% are going to morph into some type of reusable system like loop. So these are the kind of goals we're seeing. We're seeing great commitments by companies, recyclable, compostable, reusable by 2025. So as we talk more, I just want to emphasize, and Robert did a great job with this, plastics itself is a problem. That's not going away. And even if we can recycle some of them, it's not necessarily the best option all the time. So we're going to talk through some other options. So with that, I also want to show that, so with recycling, which is kind of where we are here, those materials are, for plastics, they're recycled 1 to 3-ish times maybe. So your plastic bottles become carpet. That carpet doesn't get recycled at the end of the day. So recycling is helping perpetuate how long materials are in use, but it's not the circular economy that we'd all like to get to, where those materials are continually being recycled and reused, and we're reducing our impacts upon our climate, upon our ecosystems. So recycling was never meant to be the final solution. It was sort of meant to be a stepping stone, and we sort of stalled out a little bit along the way. So what do we do? And this really comes down to all of you. This is really about working throughout the entire supply chain, coming together as packagers and brands and recyclers and looking at how do we redesign the system. The system is not working. So it isn't about just what do we do with recycling or how do we do better with product design. It's about looking at the entire way the product moves throughout the supply chain and keeps moving throughout the supply chain. So we really looked at that systems-based approach in our report to evaluate kind of what are the best options for pouches moving forward. And we broke our recommendations into several tiers, and we'll walk through all of these. I will say that we could probably we do a solid webinar on any of these options, and there'll be lots of debate, and there'll be lots of save room for some questions today, and definitely more questions from our panel tomorrow. So this is meant to be just sort of a brief overview on some of these options. Lots of nuances in here for sure. And I mentioned no silver bullets also. So preferred solutions. These are things we feel really good about and would recommend get some serious consideration moving forward. I won't spend very much time on this because Robert did a great intro on Loop. But Loop is really a game changer. These are major brands investing in not just reducing plastic, not just making plastic a little bit better, but totally eliminating it as much as possible from the system. This is really changing the way we think about packaging. And I think so this is super exciting to finally get, a viable reuse option. And this is also really important to think about e-commerce and how that is rapidly reshaping how we interact with, how we get our products and packages. One of the questions at the Sustainable Packaging Coalition conference this week was whether or not we're going to have grocery stores in 10 years, right? So we're talking about like a fundamental shift in how our products are delivered to us. So part of this challenge is like, how are we designing our packaging for the system we want 5 years from now? Not the system we necessarily have today or the system we design tomorrow, right? We're in the process of redeveloping a lot of things. And if none of these are necessarily that thing you're gonna be able to do tomorrow and it's done and it's awesome. So if these are all longer term challenges, not longer term, but these are challenges that are gonna take a couple of years to develop and you're gonna have to work collaboratively. So what does that look like? If we really have to redesign a system, what is the system we want, right? Let's break down some barriers. So Loop being a great one to look at. The other one that's a little bit more doable today is some of the store drop-off programs for some of the pouches. So these are getting they're getting ground up, they're getting collected in stores. They are getting mixed with some other different plastics, mostly plastic bottles, plastic milk jugs, and they're being made into plastic lumber, which is a pretty quality product and has a lot of growth. Many of you know Trex is the big player in this space. These pouches tend to be mono resin, right? So they're like they're HDPE, they're LDPE, meaning they're one type of plastic or they're very minimal amounts of other plastics. So it's a little bit of a design challenge. It doesn't necessarily fit all products and packaging, but it's a step in the right direction. And I think this design toward reducing the amount of resins is gonna help recycling markets in general. So this is something we feel pretty good about. We of course can talk a lot more, but the other one in the preferred bucket is kind of what you guys are doing today, right? Coming together as an industry to look at what is our opportunity. So I want to tell a quick story about Curtin Council. So when I talk about cartons, I'm talking about aseptic or gable top, and I know you have, right. I'm talking about you go to the grocery store and on the shelf you are buying a carton of milk or broth or chili or things that have been replacing steel cans, right? So they are non-refrigerated cartons. They typically have a foil inside. Cartons 10 years ago were not recyclable, but they are a great product because they don't have to be refrigerated. So they have a big reduction in environmental impacts because we don't have to use the refrigerated trucks, so they're great for transport. So here comes this product that's definitely a better package, but not recyclable. And so what happened is the industry got together and they said, we need to solve this. And they've been working throughout the supply chain. They've been setting up recycling plants in the country. They've been investing in recycling facilities, putting in equipment to be able to sort these materials, working out the logistical challenges. Now they can say today cartons are recyclable in 60% of the US, which is huge, and they're working toward 100%. So this is a group that absolutely has made it happen and has worked with every player in the supply chain, and so that would be my challenge to you. You know, be the Curtin Council success story, maybe in 5 years instead of 10. And I think there's also a lot of great other industry partners. I know natural food is really big here in Boulder. They are facing some of these very similar challenges. And I'll also give a shout out to the Recycling Partnership, who's got a film and flexibles packaging task force. So everybody's working on these issues. I think you guys have huge opportunity to lead. And I think Curtin Council is a great model. So with that, I want to jump into some solutions that are maybe going to be okay and maybe have some pitfalls. And I want to emphasize that when we looked at kind of what are your options moving forward, we didn't just look at from an environmental perspective. We also thought, you are businesses, right? You need to make an investment in your packaging, and that is a risk, right? You're going to put a lot of time and effort to move toward a type of packaging that is going to end up not being recyclable or not compostable or not what you thought it was. That's a lot of wasted time and effort, and that's a big risk for you. So we wanted to look at some options that were both good for the environment and reduce risk for your business. So some of these pose a little bit more of a business risk or an environmental risk. The first one that comes into that bucket is compostable packaging. So I know for many of us, compostable packaging seems like this is the solution, right? We're just going to put it back in the earth, build soil again. This is perfect. And I'm not going to say that it can't be, but it has a few key issues. While it's very well perceived by consumers, there are not a lot of composting facilities in the US that will take this. Less than 5% of households have access to composting. So as much as recycling is challenging, composting is a whole nother ballgame. From working with composters, they don't want this packaging. I'm just gonna say that. That's pretty much where they are with it. Their job is to make a soil amendment. They want to know that what they put into their process gives them a good output. This is seen as contamination for them. It delivers no nutrient value to the soil. It costs them a lot of money to process it. It comes with a lot of other contamination because people are confused about what's compostable. So those are challenges that can be overcome. But right now, what we're seeing and hearing from composters, I was just at the composting conference in Oregon this year. Portland, for example, one of the big composters in the country, they no more packaging, food only. So there's a strong movement in composting right now to move away from all types of packaging and really focus just on food. And so I don't think that we can't overcome that, but it's a little risky, I think, at this point. TerraCycle is also a program that comes with some solid pros and some solid cons. This is a little bit different than the store take-back in that TerraCycle's markets are not as developed. They're doing some playgrounds and they're doing some park benches, but they're sort of more one-off projects rather than a really solid a business model. So Trex, for example, making recyclable lumber, they got a lot of lumber that they can produce. TerraCycle's markets are a little less developed. So the mail-back programs, I think, also come with viability moving forward is a little questionable. I'll just leave it at that. And a couple other things I'm just going to touch on. Bio-based plastics are great. But right now, most of them are made from GMO corn, which has we can spend a whole nother issue talking about that. So there's a lot of development that can happen in that area. So again, kind of just proceed with caution. There are some efforts, meaning one pilot program underway to try to sort flexible film in curbside recycling. It's making some headway, but it's looking to be extremely expensive, and scalability is a huge question. So that's something we're watching, but I wouldn't bank on necessarily just yet. And we also know switching to other materials is maybe not the best solution. Glass comes with a lot of different impacts. Paper has some impacts. So not to say any of these aren't the right solution, but they have a little bit, they have a few pitfalls we need to evaluate. And lastly, I want to wrap up with a couple of things that really come with some heavy pitfalls that I want to talk about. And so these are things that we'd really caution against at this point. The first one being plastics to fuel. This sounds like a great option, but at the end of the day, when we take plastics and we turn them into fuel, we have to turn around and make more plastics. So we're not really getting to that circular economy. We're not reducing our use of plastics. So we don't really see this as a very viable option. It also has some huge economic challenges that come along with it, and the carbon footprint is very questionable. With that is the Hefty Energy Bag program. This is a pilot program in 3 communities across the US to collect a whole slew of plastics in an orange bag at your curb and recycle them. Anytime somebody tells you they're just going to take a whole bunch of miscellaneous plastics and recycle them, don't buy that. And the last one here, degradable additives. So as much as we don't want to see plastics in the ocean, there's a lot of companies developing things where these plastics will break down in water. That is a huge problem in that smaller pieces of plastic are much harder to pick up than larger pieces of plastics. And there is a big difference between compostable and degradable. So again, lots more we can talk about on all these things, but just kind of wanted to introduce some of these. I will say there's a big question mark around chemical recycling. There's been a lot of buzz around this. The term refers to a class of different types of technologies that are just now coming to scale. And I'm going to tell you, everybody is watching this, right? It is definitely the buzz. And it has some potential to really reshape recycling. And it has a lot of really big questions about cost, scalability, the pollution that's coming out of these facilities, and how much of it is really just plastics to fuel under a different name. So lots more kind of to come in this space, but something to watch carefully. And with that, I will say that moving forward, there are some things we can do right now. As I said, none of these, right, I have not presented you with the silver bullet, but there are some things we can do right now that would really help. And one of those is increasing recycled content, particularly post-consumer recycled content, PCR. That helps support recycling programs. Again, we exist because we can sell our materials to somebody that they can use in a product. So if you want recycling to succeed, you need to buy those materials and put them in your product. That is the best way to support the system right now. Labeling is also great. We are supporting the How to Recycle label. Even if your product is not currently recyclable, put this on your label, because you're helping educate people about what to put in the bin, and we're getting a lot of contamination, a lot of that wishful recycling. And if you're able to educate people, hey, it's not recyclable, you're helping recycling succeed by keeping it cleaner and working more cost effectively. So we have seen some great brands step up and say, not recyclable yet. And last but not least, many of you have talked about bulk at some of your stores, switching to larger packaging options, things like that. So with that, report is on the website, as long as some great other information, and I will wrap up. I am here the rest of the day. We're going to have a panel tomorrow to talk more about this. So thank you for listening, and thank you for your leadership in working together to solve these problems.
Tomorrow to facilitate a panel, so we'll get a lot of additional opportunities to ask questions as well. So are there 2 questions that people just can't get? Okay.
So can you elaborate on the chemical, or not the chemical recycling, the plastics to fuel? You said something like it perpetuates more plastic or something. I kind of got lost there. So what is it? And I mean, I get carbon footprint in the sense of burning plastic and putting it in the air doesn't sound great, but I'm just trying to understand, what are the main concerns with, just taking whatever plastic can't be reused and trying to turn it into, I guess, energy, if you will.
Sure.
Can you rephrase the question, please?
Yeah, so the question is about plastics to fuel and why we recommended against that option. So plastics to fuel, waste to energy has gone by a lot of different names over the several years. Waste incineration is the most common form of it. And we've seen a lot of problems with these facilities. First, they are extremely expensive to build. Waste incineration plant is $300, $600 million. The problem is it's meant to be something that we'll use that for just whatever's left. Well, once you invest that money in whatever's left, you are feeding everything to that because you've just made a massive investment. And we can talk about communities that have greatly curtailed their recycling programs because, well, we have to feed this thing that we built. So there's that concern. The other concern is that by burning these plastics, so yes, it's slightly better than landfills for those plastics that we have now. We're like, what are we doing with this? Does have some health impacts, which are another issue. But the bottom line is it's just not a circular solution, right? If we burn these plastics, we have to go back and get more oil to make more plastics. And so we're never really reducing our impacts of plastics, which are fossil fuel based. And so that's where we look at it like this is just perpetuating. We're still using plastics. We're still making them from fossil fuels. And yes, we're doing something that may be slightly better at the end, but we're not really addressing the whole system of things. And so that's where we don't really see that as a circular solution. We don't really see that as something new. Chemical recycling has some different applications where you can actually take that plastic, break it down into the base plastic. So plastic being a long chain of molecules, you can basically break it down to the smaller chains and then use it again to make new plastics, which is different, which has some different potential and where you basically are keeping those molecules circulating around the economy. So that's kind of the nuance that we'd like to split it up that way.
All right, thanks, Kate. So if you have a question that has to be answered because you aren't going to be here tomorrow, I would encourage you to ask that now. But that was a long enough response that we might just keep it to one question and move into our happy hour section of today. Anybody else not going to be here tomorrow that has just a question they need? Oh. He's ready for happy hour. Okay, so let me move into the next portion. Thank you so much, Kate.